And I think we should be live. If anyone's already here in the chat, let me know. I know we're a minute or two early, but wanted to get the stream up as people are joining. Also, hopefully people will actually want to join the stream here. I'll share the link to do that shortly, as soon as some people start rolling in. But yeah, say hello in the chat. It's always fun to see where people are watching from. And then obviously, if you are building agents or interested in building agents, it's always interesting to hear why or what you're building on right now. And again, I'm going to wait a minute before we kind of go into the actual motion here and open up the stream for other people to join as well. Let me pull up a couple things on my end. Actually need to get the book up so I can reference it if needed. I don't show the book on stream. I'm pretty sure that would be, against some sort of copyright law or something like that. And I'll share links in the chat here shortly as well. Actually, let me open up. Awesome. Welcome, David. Great to see you. Hopefully, okay, cool. It shows up in the stream. Comments also show up in the stream. So again, I will share how this works here in a minute if it's your first time. But you can there will be an option for you to come join the stream if you want to participate in the audio or video discussion. You don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to. But also, a lot of people really just prefer to talk in the chat. And so sometimes you could just stick in the chat, have the discussion there, and I'll read comments out loud. But if you want to come join the stream, you can as well. I see Niels is here. Would love to have Niels talk about agents. And he said, building agents on Flight 2.0 and Union. So the Union's the company that we both work at. Niels is my coworker, which I'll have a slide later talking about if you're hiring to share it. But we are hiring. So if you are interested in looking at Careers with Union, let me just share the link in the chat. Check it out. And we are building some really cool stuff, as Niels kind of mentioned. This event isn't about Union, but since kind of Niels provided a nice segue to it and talking about hiring, we're building some really cool stuff for agents. So if you are building agents and you want to check it out as a tool, but also, like I mentioned, we're hiring. So if you're interested in working in that space, check it out as well. And happy to talk a little bit more about that later if people are interested. Someone asked, is this a good book for a beginner or does it expect some skill set? Good question. I think this book could be good for a beginner, but it does probably expect that you have some experience, I think, with like some large language models and code. Although I will say, at least for me, and we'll get into the actual discussion, that I feel like it was written with like, you haven't done too much, like it does an introduction for generative AI. And for me, sometimes this happens with a lot of books. It feels a little slow at the beginning or repetitive at the beginning because every book starts with that, which is good. I think they should, but it's like I've read so many books now and they all kind of start with that, with kind of introduction to generative AI. And then David said he's not a complete beginner, but found it easy to follow. So yeah, I think it'd be good. And we'll talk more about the book here in a second. So also just making sure, is my audio and video okay? In the past, there's been a couple streaming issues. I want to make sure that I'm actually streaming here. Okay, I do look okay from what I can see. All right, yeah, so I'm gonna go through intro slides, and then if people want to join the discussion, I'm sure more people will be rolling in. Then let me just go through the intro, and I'm gonna share links again in the chat. So this is a link to the book if you haven't read it yet. You can search this and find this book almost anywhere. This is the O'Reilly link, which is the platform I usually read on. And I always mention too, a lot of times libraries have O'Reilly online for free. So you could go look at your library. If you have a card, you can likely get the online platform for free and read a lot of the books, which is really cool. Also, a lot of universities have that access for free as well. Someone said they only heard one dropout. Okay, good. I should be good. I just always like to double check. I know there's been times in the past where I was super choppy and no one even said anything. And I was like, oh, I should have tried to do something. And then there's a link to the GitHub. So most books too, it's kind of nice. They have GitHubs available for you to go look at. So if you want to go look at all the code, you can find it on the GitHub there as well. I always suggest, obviously, buying the book, supporting the author, but you can read online often for free if you can get the O'Reilly access, and then check out the code as well. And this is AI Book Club. So who has been here before? If you've been here before, say hello in the chat, or say that you've been here before in the chat. Everyone should say hello in the chat. In short, we read a new book every month and discuss online. It's kind of switched different formats. I won't go too much into it, but we're doing this live stream format because LinkedIn killed our audio stream before, which was a different format we used to use. And then we also have a Slack channel in the open source flight Slack. So if you do want to discuss during the month as you're reading, which I myself have done a pretty poor job at, go check out the Slack channel, though. There's an AI reading club channel. And then hopefully in the next coming months, I really want to put on some other type of events like hackathons and actually building stuff. And it would be cool if it ties in. I will be doing stuff with agents like we talked about, the open source. We have some really cool stuff around agents coming out. So it'd be cool to tie in like book club, but if you want to maybe get practice building the stuff you're learning, hopefully we can do that through some other types of events. You can also check out the GitHub for this book club if you want to see what's coming up, but also really the main best place now to stay updated if you want to come read a new book every month is going to be on Luma. So I'm going to share the event here. I suggest like RSVP on there and you'll stay in the loop of everything. Meetup isn't as good at it. And obviously if you RSVP on LinkedIn and stuff like that, it kind of gets lost. I mean, you follow me, you can see when I post it, but if you really want to stay in the loop, go on to Luma. And then this is just kind of recap of the books. Oops, I forgot to update this check mark here. These are all the books we've read so far this year. We also did 12 books last year. So the book this month is Building Agentic Systems. Cool. I see a lot of people saying hello in chat. This is awesome. I mentioned earlier, I'll share a link here shortly if you actually want to come join the stream with audio or video. But I know a lot of people also like to just discuss in the chat, which is totally fine. This month, we read Building Agentic AI Systems. This is what we're going to be discussing today. And then the next one that's booked is September, or in September, is the Effective Conversational AI. I just skimmed this. It looks pretty cool, where it goes into thinking about kind of design aspects of like, what does it actually look like to put conversational AI into production? So I'm excited to read that. Manning stuff is usually really good as well. And then October, we're going to read LLM Ops. And then November, it was decided we were going to read Deep Learning for Biology. So this is kind of our second more specific vertical focus one. In last month, we did the Reinforcement Learning for Finance, which is interesting as well. And then what do you want to read next? If you have an idea, say hello, share it in the chat, or bring it up later in the audio discussion. But there's a ton of books coming out. There's a whole bunch that are in early release state right now that I'm keeping an eye on. This one is supposed to come out in October, Building Applications with AI Agents. I know everyone wants to read this one. I just usually wait until they actually get released because they can get delayed. So I don't want to put a book up and then it not come out. So let me know what book you want to read next. I think it'll be really exciting. All right, so the format, like I said, a lot of people like staying in the chat. That's totally fine. I'm going to share a link now. If you do want to come up and discuss an audio, like I mentioned, you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to. Usually at least one person or a couple people will come up and kind of give their opinions. And hopefully that's like more fun than just listening to me. Someone said they're not finding the slides on GitHub. Let me just hang on 1 second. Let me try to make them shareable. I usually do share them out, but I forgot this time. Thank you. Anyone with link and copy link. All right, I will share the direct link to the slides in the chat. Thank you for the reminder. All right, so I'm going to catch up on some of the chat messages. Like I mentioned, if some people do want to join in, I shared the link in the chat for you to join. If you want to join the actual stream here, again, no pressure. A lot of people like to talk in that chat, and that's awesome too. There's a whole bunch of messages, which is awesome. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit, and then we'll get into the actually, this is a good opportunity to have shout outs. So there's been a lot of like kind of community that's kind of been built in here, which is really cool. So I always like to give opportunities for people to shout out, like, are they hiring? Are you looking for a job? Do you have any awesome projects you're working on and you want to share any links to that? And then I had a reminder for myself down here that if you are in Seattle, I'll be co-hosting a in-person event, a happy hour that I will share the link to as well. So if I know a lot of people here are not from Seattle, that's where I'm located. And if you want to join the in-person event, you can do so there, which I think will be really fun. And it's right after reading this book. So if you did happen to read this book, you could come discuss it more there as well. And then with that, I forgot to update the title here. It's Building Agentic AI Systems. And then these are all the chapters. I'll read all the chapters out loud, and then we can discuss them in the chat, or if you want to join the stream, let me know. So, and I actually see Steve is up here. Welcome, Steve. How's it going?
Good.
Awesome. And I'll quickly go ahead and just read out the chapters again. Shout out in the chat if you had any that stood out to you or you thought they were super interesting. We had the chapter 1, Fundamentals of Generative AI. Chapter 2 was Principles of Agentic Systems. Chapter 3 was Essential Components of Intelligent Systems. Chapter 4, Reflection and Introspection in Agents. Chapter 5, Enabling Tool Use and Planning in Agents. 6 was Exploring the Coordinator, Worker, and Delegator Approach. 7 was Effective Agentic System Design Techniques. And then Chapter 8, Building Trust in Generative AI Systems. 9, Managing Safety and Ethical Considerations. 10, Common Use Cases and Applications. And then there is like kind of a conclusion chapter with some future outlook. And so we can go through, by default, I kind of usually go through per chapter and we can go a little bit deeper into them. But I always like to open up if there's any that stood out for anyone watching right now. Again, you could put it in the chat. Or Steve, if you read the book or if you didn't read it, do any of these titles sound the most interesting to you? And I see in the chat, I saw a lot of people said it was their first time here. So welcome, everyone. Oops, I almost exited out of the stream. That would have been bad. All right, so by default, again, there's sometimes of a delay from me streaming to it reaching people, and then people respond in the chat a little bit later after I move on. So I want to give like 30 seconds or something like that if there is any specific opinions or shout outs for these different types of chapters or these different chapters. I think I personally found, I think it was like beginning chapter 4, 5, and 6 were some of the most interesting to me. And then I have the recap of what was in 7. What was in 7? Cool. I see Derek is coming up too. Welcome, Derek.
Hey.
Did you read the book or have any opinions on things mentioned so far?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed the book. I found it a bit more theoretical than I was hoping for. There was
Same.
a lot of like build up in each section, so I was kind of like, I want to see more code snippets, and even the code snippets they did felt more like pseudocode. Like it was like, okay, yeah, you're kind of going into it a little bit, but you're not like showing the exact implementation or like going into very deep stretches. It's like almost you're hand waving some pieces.
I agree.
But to go a little bit deeper into like what I liked, I really liked how they kind of put LangChain, Crew AI, and then I'm forgetting the other third one, but how they kind of put the where you would use these 3 types, where it's like, okay, Crew AI is a very hierarchical structure. When you go top down, LangChain's more of you got the graph connecting different pieces. And then I'm forgetting the second one, but that one's more like the round robin collaborative solution that you would go for.
AutoGen.
Yeah, AutoGen. There we go.
Yeah, which I think also, I could be wrong. I feel like I just saw something the other day. So I think there's like a new version of AutoGen that's like A2G or something. I could be wrong. I have to look it up because I think that might have like spun out as a separate startup maybe now because it was open source at Microsoft. And I have to double check. But it seemed like there's like new stuff coming around that framework, and I haven't heard as many people talk about it, and I want to go check out what's going on there as well.
Oh yeah, I definitely, after seeing, I feel like I got a taste for it in this book, but it's like I really want to dive into each framework, and I'm kind of trying to determine what to prioritize learning first, or what would be more a generic approach to learn first, and then to specify into like the other ones. I'm kind of a bit shy of jumping to LangChain just because of how the book positioned it as being very graph centric. You have to do a lot of default setup. You have to know exactly how everything's running and how it connects, and so that kind of scares me a bit from LangChain, even though I've seen it's very popular on Udemy and other learning sites.
Yeah, I need to play around with it more. There's all these different frameworks. I've tried. I think I did like a little bit more than a Hello World in LangGraph, but not that much more than that as an experiment. And it did seem good. But yeah, it was almost felt like the like like there's what's the word I'm looking for? It isn't quite as intuitive. Like you need to think a little bit about the graph structure or something like that. But I think once you do that, it does seem pretty powerful, and it does seem like one of the more popular agent frameworks that I've been seeing around, and it's always fun to see what the discussions are and stuff like that of which ones people like. I like Llama Index too. I've tried that a little bit, and it's felt very easy. I don't know if you've tried that framework at all.
Oh no, I haven't. I think I've only just played with the Llama model, like just using OpenAI to call like a local instance of the model, but only through the OpenAI framework, and I didn't even use any actual frameworks. Like I shouldn't say framework, library. I didn't use any actual frameworks to coordinate some kind of like multi-model coordination of things.
Right. And actually, it's fun to take notes sometimes. Or sorry, Steve, I saw you a note or unmute.
No, that's okay. You guys are having a great chat. I just don't think in graphs. That's the problem, right? Like it's too much impediments mismatch for me to try to think of like the hurdle to take that on feels like too much given the problems that I have, and the community's not big enough and it's not core enough for me to really take on that graph stuff. So I haven't played with any yet. I've done just a little bit of agent work, but I'm thinking about maybe playing with Llama Stack also as well. Also out of Meta, but part also of the OpenAI Alliance. It's a much larger framework though. It does like agentic stuff, but it also has like built-in data stores for doing like RAG and stuff like that. It's a bigger framework, but that's probably I'm at Red Hat, and we're pretty invested in Llama Stack as well. So that's what I'll probably be playing with. Full disclosure.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember we met at ODSC East, right?
Yep. Yes, we did.
Great to see you again.
You too, sir.
I was making a list of frameworks. I know I'm missing some. Crew AI, obviously. I know also Pydantic has one. There's a ton to check out. And it's actually been on my list to go build kind of a hello agent in all of these just to kind of see the syntax, what I like and stuff like that. And then also what I found is building out some just agentic stuff myself recently. No framework is also pretty great a lot of the time. Like you don't always need a framework to manage your tools. Like you can even make a function or a decorator called tool that does the same thing if you want to add kind of that nice syntax in. And then that's been nice to kind of have complete freedom, and also maybe learning about implementing the different types of like reasoning and stuff like that. Like I think why you would use a framework is you don't want to do that, but it's kind of fun to like have the freedom if you actually want to change how your React reasoning framework works or something like that. You're not really held by any frameworks and implementation, which is kind of nice.
Well, I think it's a good point, because I think if you build from the bottom, then you can kind of understand how it works underneath, and then you can be more comfortable in any framework you use. Because otherwise, if you don't have the feeling of, what's it like to actually connect a tool here, a function there, get all these things put together, then you're just going to be kind of like relying on frameworks and never able to be like, this one doesn't really need a framework, or maybe it's a very simple implementation and I want very specific control over how it's being done. So then you could go into no framework.
Yep. And from the discussions that I've just talking to people and reading online and stuff, and this isn't obviously everyone, but a lot of times you might start with a framework and then you want to move off of it when you're going more into production and you want to have more control and or get rid of certain things that are embedded in some sort of framework. Like I've seen that a lot too in the past with like LangChain, for example. It is amazing. It has all these pre-built things. Like you want to do a RAG database, you want to do all this stuff. Like if you're at a hackathon and you want to get something done in 2 hours or whatever, like these are awesome, right? But then when you're going to production, you're like, okay, well, it has this built-in web scraper, but I actually want to like scrape and process things differently or something. And then so you might go build your own. So that's what I keep seeing too. Reading some comments here real quick too. Tim said they liked the understandable high-level discussion of concepts. Maybe that's because I didn't do the code examples. I think I only ran a couple of the code examples early on too, and it's been my bad habit with a lot of the books is I don't run a lot of the code. But then sometimes I know what's in the book, and then I come back to it later and run code or look at code later, which has been useful. Someone mentioned N8N is another agent framework. N8N is like the orchestration piece for it's no code as far as I know. I could be wrong. Maybe there's different versions or something, but N8N is like the graphical interface or interface where you can drag and drop kind of agent workflows or any workflow really. But most people are when you're really building a lot of stuff. Well, I live in the world with developers are not using the drag and drop ones. And David said they did a simple agent flow on his own, and it wasn't that hard. Evaluating interaction and improving it was the difficult part. I totally agree. And with LangChain and LangGraph, there's like tools in that ecosystem too for evaluation and stuff like that. It's actually one thing I'll share real quick too. Let me pull up a repo. We had mentioned Flight earlier, so that's the open source from the company I work at, Union AI. We have Flight, which is an orchestration layer that's been around for a long time, or an orchestration platform that's open source, and it's used by like thousands of companies of production for like training ML models and stuff. And then we just announced 2.0, which gets rid of the DAG, and you can do dynamic stuff in there. And so you can check out the SDK. It's in beta right now if you want to try it out. But it's another orchestration framework that like I've been building for agents or using for agents, and we have customers running agents on it right now. And it's cool seeing a lot of the stuff that we learned, and I mean just mean the industry in general, about putting and training ML models in production, often also apply to agent production, which I think gets touched on sometimes in some of the chapters here. Not always as in depth, but for example, if you're doing like a really large coordinator or something that's doing like long chain of thought reasoning, and you're doing a very large multi-agent like deep research agent or something like that, and then if a agent fails or a tool fails later down the line, chances are you don't want to rerun the entire like agentic pipeline again. So you can have like these cached outputs and then restart from that spot. And that's like something when I talk with people putting agents in production, it's like a big cost to them, because one, time, like if you're doing a whole chain of thought reasoning again, that can take up a lot of time, but also just token spending. So being able to actually cache outputs, and that's like what Flight has done with like training, and then 2.0 you can do this with like agents too. So it's just interesting talking with people. Like in production is very different, or there's all these different interesting edge cases that come up that's a little bit different than just building something like a notebook. Welcome, Stanley. How's it going?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. Yeah, it's going well. How are you?
Good. Did you read the book or anything interesting on agents in general?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to read the book, but I have been exploring agents recently. And yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to just jump in is because you mentioned, I saw like a really cool Twitter thread a few months back. I'll try and find it during this conversation. But essentially, in this Twitter thread, they had tried building the same essentially agent with all the different frameworks, and then comparing like which one was easier to use, which one was more difficult. But one of the ones that they actually highlighted was this there's a library called DSPY, which
Oh yeah.
has been becoming essentially, I think, more popular just because it has this capability for automated prompt engineering. So you just need to specify, I think there's like 5 parts or 5 components that you need to specify, and then it takes care of the prompt that it uses an LLM to essentially find the best prompt for like the agent, whatever you're doing. But he found that essentially, I think with most libraries, it took him maybe half an hour to kind of like write the application. But he did have some familiarity with DSPY, but he said it like literally took 10 minutes with DSPY. So that could be worth checking out. But yes, I have played with LangGraph a bit, and I haven't done a lot of the node kind of work. But I recently was doing a workshop where I was essentially kind of like deploying an agent all the way to production, just like and just seeing how easy that was to do. And it's quite fun actually. But I do think this is definitely the year of agents.
Yeah.
So yeah, this book is coming in at the perfect time.
Yeah, this is the first, I almost feel like, proper agent book that is really come out. And I know, like, I can see the roadmap of all those early releases on O'Reilly. Like, there's gonna be so many in like 2026. They just take time to write. And then it sucks because sometimes, like, we actually read another agent book a couple months ago, and it was clearly written like last year, and so much had changed by the point that it came out. And it's like it is really hard to keep up with this space and put it in a book format right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Like Cody said, DSPy looks interesting. I've seen them around a lot, and I could be wrong. I think they have a lot of features now. I think they had kind of started as like a input and output kind of like, I don't know if format's the right word, but like basically checking like the input and output state and like validation, which like Pydantic also was doing that. And then they have their own agent framework that I haven't used it either. Pydantic AI. It's another framework. I've heard good things about it. I haven't used it. Again, there's new framework every day. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
Another one that I haven't used yet, except for once at like a workshop that they were hosting. It seems really cool. I want to go test it out again. Is BAML by Boundary, and they're also for like input and output validation for LMs, which is really cool. So just making your inputs and outputs incredibly reliable, because I don't know if people have done a lot of work with LMs and they still sometimes like don't put the JSON in the right output and stuff like that. I've had that happen quite a bit. So people should check out BAML. The company is, I think, Boundary ML. They're another Seattle startup, so I know them. What else have you learned about building agents, Stanley or Steve or Derek or anyone else in the chat as well?
Well, I think I did the first kind of like tutorial I did on I did a tutorial by this guy. His name is I think he's quite well known in the ML space. His name is Eugene Yan, and he has this really good, like, very popular technical blog. And he was essentially building an agent that would take the top news articles on Hacker News, right? And then it would categorize them by topic. And then after so actually, let me just backtrack a bit. The main architecture, there was like a main agent, which would then spin up multiple other agents. Each of these agents would have their own session. And he was using this command line tool called like tmux, which lets you have different sessions. And then each of these agents would be responsible for certain links to go and kind of check. So yes, they had Hacker News, but also had like maybe TechCrunch and other websites. Then they would collate all of this information. It would then get categorized by the agent, and all of it would be compiled into one report. So for each link, you'd have essentially what the topic was, the link to it, and the summary of the article. I thought that was like underneath the hood, it was using Amazon Q, which I think is a I think maybe like an agent or some sort of LLM wrapper provided by Amazon. But I thought that was quite a neat use case, just because I like going on like Hacker News and just seeing what the top things are, etc. So just being able to not have to do that and just it being presented for me, I thought that was quite a cool use case. So I'll actually find the tutorial and I'll put it in the chat, because I think it's a good. If you haven't done any agents, it's quite good because it is quite bare bones, but it's got like some very good functionality.
Awesome. Yeah, and I shared the link to his blog in general in the chat. I don't know the specific one you were talking about, but he has great writing, so I definitely recommend following him too. He's also in Seattle, I believe. So,
So the insights I've gone to a couple hackathons, played around with it a little bit, looking what's going on. And I'm in the Bay Area, so there's tons. Like every night, there's multiple things happening, which a lot of hype. But that said, to me, this feels like the new microservices, right? So like first we had enterprise service bus, then we had microservices, and now in like this AI world, agentic AI is like a reinvention of or reinterpretation of microservices. Unfortunately, I think one of the problems that I've seen is that the data science community and the AI community is not really aware of all the things that went into microservices. So like a lot of the patterns that were learned in microservices are like being reinvented here. Like you don't see async by default out of the box. You don't see message bus integration. There's only a few projects that are starting to deal with authentication. Everybody's like, agent, just make an agent, just make an agent, right? And it's like, okay, but do you really want everybody being able to get to your agent? And how do you handle agents talking to each other, knowing that they have access to that? They should actually have access to that agent. And so that's one of the things I'm seeing. I do recommend that the agent community, start looking into what microservices kind of figured out, because it's really similar, and we're going to need I think we're going to need the exact same things. There was a really good, it's about 2 hours worth, but Data Robot did an AIX summit talking about agents and things like that. And there was a lot of really good presentations in there. And then there was this guy from, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's Oxy, which this part I know. It's Warren Buffett's petrochemical company, basically. He was head of IT. No, he was head of AI something or other at that company, and he said most of their agents are not written in Python, and they're not even AI. Like most of their agents are just services that other things call into to do stuff, and I don't think they let any agents do any writing at this point. I think all agents at this point are still basically read only, just because scary. And so it was really great watching his talk and like talking about it. And then the other thing, practical thing, if anybody out there is gonna host an agent hackathon, like even internal to your own company, have hosting figured out before you run the hackathon, because it's really disappointing to show up to a hackathon and then not have a way to host any agents that you run, because agents have to live somewhere to call them, especially if you want something like Claude or any of those other applications to call into your agent. It has to be at a real URL that the outside world can see, not just your laptop, unless you're going to run desktop apps. And then the last thing is, I think it's I don't know if it's a reinvention of how to say this the best way, but like we've seen a lot of people not really take on evaluation of LLMs for their own purposes, because most people aren't going to use the LLM out of the box unless they're just doing whatever. But if you're really going to run your own LLM or fine tune it or do something, what a lot of people have been doing for evaluation is, I tried it, tried a couple phrases, and it seemed pretty good, so that's what I'm going to go with, right? And they compare like a couple just like that. And I heard a really good podcast, and I'll try to find what it was, talking about it, LLM evaluation, and they get into agentic at the end. But it's the same problem, I think, that like the same thing that you're going to want to do, the real evaluations you want to do with an LLM is you have a rubric beforehand, right? Like these are the test questions. These are what we expect out of the answers. Here's how you evaluate the responses. And then you hand that off to teams and you say, okay, go figure it out. Like pick the best LLM. You figure it, like, or at least when you're comparing against LLMs, you want to compare it against like real predefined things beforehand, not just like this ad hoc thing. And so I think that's really important. Is that a Voxel 51 water bottle?
I worked at Voxel. I had worked at Voxel for a while. I recognized that. Yes, I love that water bottle. Sorry,
I got it for free at NVIDIA GDC, and it is one of the best like free swag things anyone's given away. So shout out to Voxel 51.
Yeah, total shout. Great. Actually, anybody, if you see a job posting for them, it was an amazing company to work for. Like this wasn't a running away from when I left. It was a going to Red Hat. Right. It wasn't a running away from Voxel. Great company, really great people. Great. Anyway, so back to the agentic thing. Like you should have that same kind of thing in place when you're starting to evaluate your agent output, right? Because what happens is, yes, you're feeding an LLM, but then that LLM is going to be feeding agents, and you want to evaluate, did the agent do the right thing? So like it's important to have rubrics around the agent before you actually start evaluating like how well is this agent versus this agent doing and all that kind of stuff. So don't wait until the end. Do it actually. It's kind of like test-driven development. It's like have the test ready before of what is good and not good, because good is so subjective and highly dependent on your use case. So those are some of the insights I've just come across lately, and I think they were really great. Let me try to find that podcast and I'll put it in the chat so you can share it. It was a really good evaluation podcast. So.
Yeah, and I think it's something. It's easy to not think about as at a hackathon, but obviously super important when you're putting stuff in production. And I see in Charles mentioned Arise, so that is a really great tool. They have Arise. Phoenix is their open source. I'll get a link to that in a second here too. And then Weights and Biases also has one called Weave, which looks really good as well. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones that I haven't kept up with all their capabilities, like LangFuse. LangGraph has one. What is it? Everything starts with Lang. It's hard to keep track of all the Langs.
Lang or Llama, take your pick. Which one do you want to put?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like they're not the same companies all the time. Like Llama Index isn't part of Llama like Meta or anything like that. So
yeah.
And Langsmith is the other one.
And the interesting part about that evaluation part in this podcast that they talked about, because I don't want to take credit for this, but I did think about this for a long time. Like leaderboards mean really nothing in terms of like evaluation, right? Like when you're trying to evaluate a model, because especially since so many now the data that goes into the models as they're training them is actually part of the evaluation benchmarks. Like this evaluation is really like specific to your use case, not I got 97.7% on this one, and we're now state of the art because we increased by 0.1%, right? Like to me, that's like people bragging about like race car F1 car manufacturers bragging about how their race cars do, when I just want a car that I want to just drive to the grocery store, right? Like the real question is, what do you want your car to do? Not what is the fastest car from 0 to 60, and evaluate it based on that kind of stuff, right? So let me find that. Let me find that link.
Yeah, and just LM evaluation in general is really interesting. So the last company I worked at before I joined Union was Y Labs, and they were an evaluation and monitoring company. And the GPT kind of boom happened when I was there. So it was fun figuring out all the metrics and changing, because it went from like, the quote of not that many people had ML in production to all of a sudden everyone has AI in production. They're using chatbots, like whatever. But it was so interesting because you'd talk to people, like I would say, oh, you're changing prompts to make it better. And then I'd be like, well, how do you know it's better? And they go, I don't know. And just like you said, or they try two things. And then like we had some built-in features, and this is probably in all these other tools, and you can actually build this in your own evaluation tool and stuff too, like catching patterns. And so automatically it would look for like credit cards or phone numbers and just surface those as a metric, like, oh, your model returned, this pattern to you. And it was interesting because I was working with like a online store support type chatbot thing, and someone was mad, and then it returned a phone number, but it just made up the phone number. Like it wasn't like they never gave it a phone number to tell. And so it was just funny because like you only caught that because they had monitoring in place. And so like otherwise, if you're like, I guess you could glance at your prompts and responses if you don't have that much traffic, but if you have high traffic, you need like some sort of metrics that you're extracting. And like I used to at least recommend, and probably still the case, of you can take like kind of like a shotgun approach with those metrics at first, and then like get rid of the ones that are noise to you. But you can look at, like, again, depending on your application, like sentiment. So if you are like a support chatbot, your chatbot probably shouldn't be super rude or something like that. And there's really lightweight models that you can have that extract those type of metrics, or like readability, or shortness. Like if you're doing a summary chatbot or something like that, it should be, you know, like there's all these little lightweight metrics that can give you a lot of insight into how your LM or agents is performing, which is pretty interesting. And then with agents now, if you're troubleshooting them without traces between everything, that can be really hard too. Or at least you need to put those traces in an output somewhere. By that I mean, like if you have a multi-agent system, and it's calling different agents and different tools, you should have that logged. Which again, subtle plug for the Flight 2.0 is really good for that. Like you go in, everything like runs in a container. You can spin up that container, reuse it, and you got tracing for tools and functions and different agents, and then every single state of input and output is cached. So one, if your agent fails, you can like retry, but also debugging, it makes it really easy. Like without some form of that, it's incredibly hard or almost impossible. Like you just won't know what happened. And also, I speaking about Eugene Yan, he just had a post today or yesterday about the evaluation piece, because just saying that is often the hardest part when you're starting a new project. Like you right away just want to go build the thing. And I've done this before too. I don't have my evaluation metrics, and sometimes that's okay if you're not actually putting it in production yet or something, but you do need to get some sort of metrics at some point. Like I actually just built something the other day and told like my coworkers to go put data in, and just so I could get some metrics of like what's going on, and then start building out that data set, because I don't have it yet. So there's different ways of doing it. Yeah, you could start internal, so it doesn't really matter what it says, and then go from there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing like that I saw that was interesting about this is like you can automate some stuff, but there's almost always still, like especially for like phone numbers, you can say, is this a real phone number or not, right?
Yeah.
Like that's easy to test, like regex, like you can do stuff with regexes, but like what's the personality of your LLM, or is the agent giving like the right flavor of what you wanted to emphasize? Like there's no way for any LLM to really do that. The one way they said to do that, there used to be a human in the loop somewhere at some point. Like, so what they were talking about, this one company, is they told subject matter experts, look, you're going to have to put an hour in every week of taking some of our responses that were like the logs from the servers of question and responses to customers, and like evaluate, is this good? Is this not good? Is this good? Like on a, on a Likert scale, 0 to 5, how good is this response? Just so they could do some training. And then the other thing about that was, what you can do sometimes, what they said with automating that stuff is you custom train an LLM on your rubric to evaluate stuff. So you're actually training an LLM to be a good evaluator of another LLM's output. It's still like, turtles all the way down, but at least that gets you like, you can at least have the LLM maybe just say, this one needs to be looked at by a real human. Right.
Yeah.
So it's somewhat automated. Like this is within the bounds of, a human needs to look at this, or this is terrible. Like this is terrible. This is decent. A human really needs to look at this one, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
So.
And if you're doing something like that too, where it's like a lighter weight LLM as a judge, not like a full thing analyzing everything, you can train like a lightweight BERT model, which still, like, BERT models are, as far as I know, like the model that's most actually in production and like fine-tuned, because it's really lightweight and they're really good at tasks like this. If you want to do like a sentiment analysis, or just like what you were saying, you can train these lighter weight models that can maybe even run on a CPU with some latency, and that's okay, and then flag human in the loop type of stuff, which is cool. This is a good question from Anand, actually. Is to your comment about hype, Steve. Is there a go-to rubric to evaluate a workflow, or if a workflow or a task would benefit from an agentic approach versus a traditional workflow? Because like you're saying, everyone wants to be agentic now.
That is for sure. It's gone beyond like sprinkle the magic AI dust on something to get it like funded. You now have to sprinkle the magic agentic dust on stuff to get people to pay attention. I haven't seen anything specific. I mean, I think the thing is like, the question is, are there external data sources to your LLM that I'm assuming you're using an LLM, right? That's what most agents are. It's like the top coordinating thing. Is there data or other things that you can't really build into your LLM or you don't want to train into your LLM. It doesn't work for, and it doesn't, like RAG is actually kind of an agentic system, right? It's a very simplistic agentic system, but it is an agentic system. Like you call out to the database agent beforehand, get the thing and add it to the context, right? It's just pre-sending it to the LLM. I guess it's not agentic, but it's similar. So it's the same. I would say if I were advising somebody on whether they should go to agents or not, does your LLM actually need access to external things? If not, if it's doing just fine on its own, then why would you add more complexity? That's all.
And I
Yeah.
think just to add on to your point, sorry, I definitely want to hear from Stanley and Derek as well. But I was going to say, to add on to your point, it would be agentic, I guess, for RAG if it makes a decision to call RAG or not. Then it's a tool, and it's like by default, a lot of RAG just gets pulled in. But if you're saying answer this question, but if you need more context, like you could think about what the question was and then decide to call RAG, and then it would be an agent, I guess. So if you want to easily say you're running agents at your work, I guess you could do that.
I might just jump in here if no one else is going to talk. I think I may be wrong, but to me, it's like if you can define a clear workflow that would benefit from one coordination, maybe even, or maybe this is more of a multi-agent versus single agent system, but like if you can define a clear workflow that's going to be accomplished instead of like, oh, this is just a quick, like user comes in and does a query or does a request and then gets information back, then you probably don't need an agentic system. But if it's like, oh, the user needs to do this, and then there's complex workflows within that, then you can break it apart to multi-agents, or at least have one single agent operating in just that sequential operation scheme, just like was mentioned in the book, to accomplish that. So I think you really just need to decide how complicated is this workflow, and can it just be accomplished by me coding, or can it be accomplished by just one LLM that does a quick like content fetch or give it back, instead of jumping into a huge agentic framework or a huge agentic workflow that may be unnecessary or way too much time or effort. And then you've also got to kind of weigh, like, is it worth paying the money for these tokens to be produced and for all these agents to work in the background? Like, how much money are you willing to spend on this workflow to automate it? Like, if you don't want to spend anything, then maybe agents isn't where you want to go with that.
Yeah, just to add on to that, there's a really good blog post by Anthropic, and essentially this is when they talk to when agents were just coming onto the scene and people were implementing them. They essentially have this post which looks at, what do teams who have successfully implemented agents in production do? And in this post, they talk about, just as you mentioned, is in a way a spectrum where you have very straightforward workflows to where now you have more agentic systems. And essentially, one of the biggest or one of the determiners is really in terms of how much reasoning is required to complete the task. So the more reasoning that's actually required, then the more agentic the system needs to be. So if we think of something like maybe like Casa, which uses our code Claude, which requires a lot of reasoning and collating and using multiple different tools, right? That is what we'd say like a much more agentic system, whereas a lot of workflows can just be completed using an LLM. For example, as Steve mentioned, a lot of RAG systems, they just call the database, right? So yeah, I've posted the posts in the chat, but I do definitely recommend it for just giving some context to the different types of patterns and when to apply each. So I think I found it quite useful.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Anthropic has some of the best like blogs on agents right now. I think for sure. If anyone hasn't checked them out, definitely go read all their stuff. They've done just really, really good content and research and working with people, and they publish really fun stuff that it's like bad at too. Like I think they did that one recently with like a vending machine or something that was all agent run that was like in the company, and they're just doing it as an experiment. Like they let it order like stuff like that and fulfill, and like I think coworkers are tricking it to order like a tungsten, like a really expensive tungsten brick or something like that. Like they have like really fun experiments that are like good examples of like maybe why you shouldn't have this thing do all the stuff, or why you need humans in the loop still.
Yeah, I think that was exactly why that Oxy guy was like, there's no writes allowed. No writing allowed, right? And you
Yeah.
don't and you don't want it in your chat agents with customers either, right? Because it could say if the customer gets it to say, oh, you owe me a refund of 5 times what I paid for it, and the agent says, okay, I'll make that happen for you. Like, it's kind of legally binding if the agent on your website actually ends up saying that, right? So
Well, it is 100% legally binding. That's what they found in I forget, was it American Airlines recently? American Airlines, their agent said, "Oh, you have like 10 days or something to get your bereavement leave, or you have like a whole month to do it." And then the person took that as like fact, went to them later and was like, "Hey, can you give me my bereavement benefit for like this flight?" And they were like, "We're not going to do that." And they took them to court and they lost, and like a legal legislation said, "Hey, whatever your chatbot says, you are accountable for what your chatbot says. So now you owe that person money and now legal fees and whatever else they sued you for."
And that's what they said in those evaluation agents. Like, you should put in some of the, like with those evaluation rubrics, put in things you definitely don't want it to ever say, and test to see if it'll ever say those kinds of things. Like, because you want to make sure it doesn't, like, that's the safeguarding stuff that you want to check for too.
Mm.
Yeah,
I have
you
a
can.
quick question
Oh,
on
go ahead.
the book that we're going to be covering this month. In terms of like security and guardrails, like does it go into that in the chapters?
It talks
Because
about.
managing safety, does it have there?
I think it was in. It goes into a little bit in like the building trust and in the managing safety one. But I think it was a little bit more theoretical. I think someone correct me if I was wrong there, but I think this had even less code examples than some of the other ones. I think
Oh,
that was
absolutely.
something.
There were no code examples at all. It was very like hand waving, be like, you could do this, you could do that, you could
Yeah.
do this other thing. It still covered it. I think it's good information to look into, but it's almost like you need to go and like take that information and go somewhere else to do the rest of the research to figure out anything, because it really didn't. I couldn't figure out kind of exactly how we're implementing these guardrails. The only thing I came to a conclusion of was in some cases you can put like, and maybe I think Sage, you said this earlier, where you can put like a small LLM to do like a quick validation of whatever's going on and just add a bunch of either human in the loop validations or just agent validations to kind of stop things, as well as like you might have frameworks that will just keep it in certain guardrails.
Yeah, and you can add, explicit words to flag. Another thing that I've done in the past that worked really good. I don't know if it's the best anymore, but like when I was working at the evaluation company, this is like a really good practice where you could build out kind of a pretty large list of stuff that you don't want it to do, and then you can embed it and then do embedding comparison between like user prompts and then say, is this near any of these things in this list? And that was a pretty good way to get a flag on it too. Like, is it close to all the stuff that I said I don't want it to? Get some sort of embedding metric from that and then say, yeah, don't respond to that. Or what I like to do in the past, and I would still probably do this, is I actually do want my LM to respond, but I don't want to give it to the person because I actually want to see what it's going to say. So I log that for myself to see like how it would have reacted to it. But you never return that response to the end user. So I actually do like, if you do get something bad, I like to put it and get the response, but then they should basically shut off that response ever going to the user. So good question. Yeah, the book talks about stuff, but yeah, it doesn't have any specific code examples here. Like we were saying, even in a lot of the other chapters, a lot of it's more theoretical, and then it does show some stuff with like Crew AI and I think LangGraph a couple times. But I think it was mostly Crew AI.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's in a way the biggest maybe one of the biggest barriers to adoption, because it seems like with these new AI technologies, LLMs, etc., like the attack surface is so much bigger, and I don't think anyone has really figured out exactly how to secure them, because even I see there's an account on Twitter. I'm not sure if you've come across it, where every time a new model comes out, it's jailbroken within like a few hours, right? It's Pliny the Liberator. So yeah, it's even if the core one of the core primitives, right, which is the reasoning part, can be jailbroken so easily, then building on top of it is kind of like building on sand in a way. So I think even haven't had a look at it, but I think in the most recent DEF CON, which is like one of these security like hacking conferences. I saw very briefly on my Twitter that they'd managed to get agents to do all sorts of things. So I think yeah, we do have to have a lot of caution at this stage in terms of definitely building guardrails and checking the outputs and really having humans in the loop, because it doesn't make sense to give them so much leeway when the technology is so nascent.
Yeah, the I didn't read that much, but the stuff I saw at DEF CON was kind of crazy, from one, breaking agents and LMs to do stuff for you, and then also the use of LMs and agents to get people to do stuff for you was kind of wild too. Like they had a competition where you would call, I think it was like a retail place or something like that, and get information, and it was only using like all AI agents and voice generation on the phone. And that was wild, because I think it worked really good for like a lot of the people that were submitting it, even when it doesn't sound perfect or anything like that, but it's good enough, especially when it's just coming over the phone and you're like, oh, it's just kind of dropping on the phone or something. And yeah, that's kind of wild and scary.
Yeah, just to riff on that, I think that is actually quite a huge problem, because I remember seeing like way back, some Altman had put out this post saying that we're going to have very persuasive systems, right? Just with the normal LLMs, before we have even agentic systems and innovators and all these other types of intelligent systems. And the fact that even before AI, people were falling to scams and to getting convinced to do all sorts of things on the phone. Now that we have essentially like agentic capability, like you have to be really, really savvy not to fall for kind of like the persuasive elements of these technologies. And even now we have like AI, so-called AI psychosis, where people, they just form these relationships with foundation models and with LLMs. So, I think in a way we have to also learn how to upgrade our own thinking to like such a high level. Otherwise, if you don't know about this technology, it seems like you're like a sitting duck, really. So yeah, I do. Yeah, I think it is definitely a big concern.
Yeah, I think those scams that have we've seen on telephones and all that stuff are definitely advancing. Just to talk about some news, I'm pretty sure this is already common knowledge, but there was that big scandal where someone was brought onto a conference call with everyone that they thought was working at the company, and it was just all AIs, and I think they wired like millions of dollars out because they were tricked that way, and it was seemed legit the whole way, because it was like, oh, this is someone I work with, or this is like the CEO telling me to do this, and I think that's just going to get worse and worse. And I know that there's a lot of different companies that are trying to kind of add little guardrails to make sure people can't really do this. One example that I'm kind of a bit upset about with the guardrail was I went on Azure's AI Foundry, and they have this thing where you can create a virtual avatar, and then you can actually have a live conversation with that virtual avatar on top of an LLM with like text to speech and all that stuff. And I wanted to train it so that it was me, and I could talk with myself with my own voice, and it could teach me like a foreign language, so I could learn the foreign language from myself. And who knows how best to teach you than yourself? But then they had AI guardrails, and the fact that they said, oh, you have to have a corporate account, you need to be working through a corporation to do this. And I was like, okay, now I need to go and get approvals and stuff. And it's just some of the, and this also highlights some of the stuff in the book near the end here, where they're saying it's kind of corporations' responsibilities now to start adding these guardrails, adding ways to prevent things like deep fakes, which is what clearly Microsoft is doing with that thing, trying to prevent deep fakes and like a lot of misinformation being spread by having potential celebrities telling you to do something that's illegal or not in your best interest, type of thing. But yeah, I think that's what I had to say there.
Yeah, the scams are definitely getting more sophisticated. I saw one recently where apparently someone was interviewing for a job. He got added to the so-called Slack company, right, of this organization. But then he noticed that the responses were just too quick, like in the channels. And it turns out they'd done all of this stuff just to get him to get into the Slack channel, download essentially to kind of like get clone the repository so that they could get the crypto uh, keys they had like on his machine, right? So
Oh
it's
my.
like the level of sophistication of like who is safe out here. Yeah, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, glad we're the ones building stuff.
It's the best defense is the offense. So you build the machines, you know how they work, and then you can defend yourself from them.
Yeah. The ultimate
I
defense.
do. It's a good reminder. I need to tell my parents again, like, don't trust,
Mm.
don't trust my voice on the phone or something, right? Like, I think it would be so easy for them to just assume it's me, like, without knowing that all this can happen. Like, even if they kind of hear about it, but
You need a
Yeah.
secret passphrase or like the wait until I'm in front of you and then you can trust me. Never like it's the same like phishing scams. You got to do the corporate training for phishing scams and all the other things, but
yeah,
for you and your friends and family.
I mean,
every year.
it's always okay, I'll call you right back. Let me go look at that and I'll call you right back. Right.
Mhm.
Like never stay on the phone for something like that and keep going. It's always I'm going to call you back at your number. And if they
Yeah.
give you some other excuse, then just wait and don't do it or do something else because just don't trust anything inbound coming like that straight away.
Mm.
So,
Yeah,
And if
no,
I
the
have
technology.
7 fingers, don't give me don't give me any money.
exactly. You know the one that made me sad that I got screwed by the most, and it's not really that big a thing. It was that rabbits on the trampoline. Did you guys see
Oh
that
yeah.
video of the rabbits on the trampoline? I was like, oh, it's a nighttime video of a whole bunch of rabbits jumping on a trampoline. And because I've seen cats and dogs for real and wolves and other things go on those trampolines. So I thought this is awesome. It's fake.
Hmm.
Anyway, sorry. I know we must be coming to the end of the hour because we're on to rabbits on trampolines.
Yeah, actually, great point. We are at the end of the hour, so we're gonna wrap up here soon. Was there anything else like that people wanted to mention or shout out kind of before we do wrap up, or anything we didn't get to in the book? I know usually with these discussions, which is how I like it, is we end up talking about general stuff that we've worked on in agents, and I think it was all super relevant to stuff in the book. But I don't know if there was anything else that people wanted to shout out or mention. And also, if you have a book idea for December and onward, think about it and share it with me either in the chat or on LinkedIn, or you can join the Slack channel too and talk there. And also open it up again too, like if anyone's hiring or looking for a job, feel free to put that in the chat as well. I know we've had quite a few people in the past like come up and join the discussions that were looking for jobs, and then they all got jobs. I don't think it was just because of the book club, but I hope it helped. Someone said they very much enjoyed the conversation. They'll read the next one. Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, huge thank you, Steve, Stanley, Derek, for coming up. It is awesome having more people up here in the discussion versus me just talking about bullet points. So this was awesome. This is like one of my favorites. I feel like I've done now so far. We've had a lot, like it was a really good discussion. A lot of people jumping in, a lot of people in the chat. This is really fun. So if you did like this, hopefully you'll want to come join the next book club. Again, that book is going to be The Effective Conversational AI. You can find it on Manning. You can usually find these books in most places. Like I said, too, most of these, this one wasn't, but most of these are also on the O'Reilly online platform. And again, most libraries can give you a subscription to that too for free. So if you're looking to read these and you're at a university or you have a library, you should see if you can get access to the O'Reilly platform. And Cody said they're on the job search themselves. Awesome. Let us know what type of job you're looking for. If you want to build agents. Anything else, Derek, Stanley, Steve, before we wrap up? Anything you want to shout out or mention?
I just think check out the book. I feel like there's a lot of places you should earmark and then come back to, and then maybe try to, like, the code's not very extensive in there, but I feel like maybe you could look at some of the systems or the ways that they've gotten things laid out and just treat it like kind of a computer science class back in university, where you have the basic idea and then you need to just implement it in like a specific language or application.
Yeah, and a lot of these too in the frameworks or implement it on your own. And you can ask ChatGPT, Claude to help you implement these things. But if you want to add in like the chain of, or not chain of thought, the React reasoning methods and stuff like that that you mentioned in here, go implement it or run it in a framework. But I thought that was interesting. Like, yeah, implementing reflection. I did this recently and it was really cool. I got cool results out of it for the thing I was working on. The coordinator, worker, and delegator approach I thought was a good too. Just thinking about how to structure those things. They're kind of what they sound like. You have a coordinator agent that sends different tasks to workers and stuff like that. And I also did this recently for something and had really good results from it too. So it is really fun to see this. And then, like you're saying, you come back and actually implement it when it's useful. And I found that to be really useful for going through these books, because we've been reading one a month and I try to read it as much as I can for sure. And usually I read it, but sometimes I read it a little bit faster than I would normally or something. And it's just good to know what's there. And then I've come back like months later, be like, that was in that book. I'm going to go reference that now that I need it. So that's been a good approach that I've taken, just reading this much, which has been really fun.
I would say some of my advice in general, because I don't know the level of sophistication of the audience or how much they played, is one, there's no way you're going to understand this without playing with it. So don't be scared, start playing with it, despite all of our scamming things that we just talked about. And then two, this isn't straight software engineering anymore, right? So in software engineering, we're very used to, I write this code, it gives this output, right? These are statistical systems, and it's all probabilistic. And so even the output from an LLM is probabilistic, and it has the data that you use in it has a really large impact on what happens. And output is not deterministic, right? And there's a lot of things you can tweak. And so we're much more at least in this stage of the game, in the art. Think of yourself more as a statistician with a question you want to answer, and how do you play around, look at the universe of outputs. It's not like I do this and I always get this, right? So you need to keep that in mind. Dig in a little bit, at least understanding some of the stuff that's happening under the hoods. These aren't magic things there's no Gen AI right now. I mean, not Gen AI, generative is what they mean. That there's no AGI going on right now. It's not even close, right? So like, don't believe the hype, I guess, would be the last thing that I would say. We're not there. LLMs are token prediction machines. And then when you use something like ChatGPT or Claude through the web interface, that's not an LLM by itself. They have built a whole infrastructure around that, whatever LLMs they're running under the hood to bring you that application. So it's trying to do a compare between, well, ChatGPT said this, and when I run this fine-tuned model that my data science team put together, it's not as good. Yeah, because you're running a single LLM versus an entire application with a huge team behind it trying to do all these really fancy things. So just try to keep some of these things in mind as you start to play. Have fun though. It's a lot of fun, I find it. So
yeah, have fun playing. Don't scam people, but have fun playing around with the models. And I think to your point too, Steve, it's like some people, I think for the first time I saw them grabbing the open source GPT models that they released, like the OpenAI released. You can go get them on Hugging Face. And I think people are like, oh, it's going to be like GPT, like just it's going to work. And then you realize, oh, yeah, actually, you have to like, how do you manage context between all the different chats? Like there's long-term memory built in. How do you store the chats? There's a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes, even from, their model. It's not just their model. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah. I mean, like, so once you understand what's actually happening, you understand that like the Claude interface, the ChatGPT interface, the Gemini interface, they've all been doing agentic systems for a long time, right? There's guardrail systems built in. There's all sorts of other systems throughout that whole building. It's just, but people don't understand that. And so anyway, can you you can build an agent
jump in here
without a GPU.
I think that's a very important part from the book as well, is that's kind of what it's teaching you, is that there's all these systems in place behind the scenes of just saying, oh, we're doing all this stuff to keep, like, we're keeping this in memory. We have the context of what your conversations are. We have the global like this whole book goes through it. And you should be thinking when you're reading a lot of these pieces, like, oh, that's what Copilot's just giving me straight up, or that's what ChatGPT is just giving me straight up. They've already done all this background stuff. And so if you just use a random model off the shelf, you're going to need to prep all that stuff unless you're just straight up calling like a proper use of like Copilot or these things that have already built this. And I'm so sorry I interrupted you, Steve, but I wanted to say that earlier, and once you said, I'm like, oh, I gotta jump in now.
Yeah, before you forget it again. No, I was just answering the anonymous LinkedIn users. That can you build an in-house agent without a GPU? Yeah, and I said yes. I mean, an agent itself is it's a tool that can do anything that an LLM calls into. That's basically what it is, right? So, like a weather checking service, there's no AI in that. That's go hit the weather service the National Weather Service, pull back the forecast, and then give it to the LLM. So that agent's just a web service, right? So the agents themselves do not require any AI. And like I said, that guy at Oxy, the Warren Buffett petrochemical company, said most of their agents, 75, 80% of their agents are just straight code, no AI stuff in them at all. So,
they replace the if statement, or they replace the LLM with if statements, basically, right?
exactly.
And also, just to tack onto that too, even if you want to use AI, you often don't need a GPU to run stuff, because you can use OpenAI. Like most people are building on like OpenAI or Claude or some sort of hosted model. You don't need a GPU because you can just call the API to do all your agent logic. So if you do want to use AI, you can do it on like almost any machine and just use it to call an API.
Yeah, and I also will say that like it's really easy this day and age to run a model on your own local machine using CPUs as well. I mean, you can't run one of the huge foundation models like requires the GPU, but like if you're talking like you were talking about BERT, like BERT doesn't actually require that much to
No.
actually run, right? So you pull down something like Olama or Ramalama or something like that, one of those things, and you can run those in really it's especially since you're not doing training, right? So like one of the really expensive things to do is the training of the neural network. That really benefits from a GPU. But when you're just doing inference only, like making predictions, which is when you're chatting back and forth with an LLM, that's all inference only. And CPUs do much better at that than they do at it's the model training that is actually really, really needs that kind of stuff. So
And I
don't
might
stop
jump in
yourself.
there for legit guidance. So I've heard that if you stay below 5 billion parameters, that's typically where they can kind of run like the very small, like below 5 billion parameter models can run a bit more effectively on your local machine.
Yeah, and then there's this whole thing called quantization, right? Like, so they usually train models in 16-bit floating point, right? But it turns out there's so many parameters in these models that there's a lot of you don't need actually something that specific when it's all done. And so what quantization is taking those parameters in the original models and making them like 4-bit or 2-bit, right? And changing them from floating points to ints, right? So those kinds of things, and those models take up much less memory and generally will run faster as well. So if you're on Hugging Face and you find a model you like, look for one of the quantized versions from a reputable company or something. I mean, that's the problem with Hugging Face right now. It's like worse than GitHub because it's like there's so many models on there and you don't know who's making them and stuff. So, but
Unsloth is really cool for quantized models. So, and they do
you're
almost
right.
every model. So like like very quickly, like the day after a new model comes out, they usually have a quantized one, and it's on Hugging Face, so you can use it in the Transformers library.
And I will give a little shout out to my own company, Red Hat. So we acquired Neural Magic a while ago, and they're a big contributor to VLLM. And one of the things they do is a lot of quantization of models so that you can. VLLM is a model serving platform, so you don't actually have to write all the infrastructure to serve it up. And they quantize a bunch of models so that you can run them. They originally started as focused on CPU only inference, but then so now they're part of VLM. So yeah, definitely look at quantized models to try a bigger model on a less architecture.
And you can fine tune on less architecture sometimes too with quantizing models and using LoRa. And you don't need like super crazy GPUs to do really cool stuff in general.
Again, don't believe the hype.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one final resource, which I find quite useful, especially in the experimenting kind of like stages. So you may have heard of OpenRouter. So OpenRouter is like OpenAI and kind of like Claude in the sense that they have essentially what we call an API, which you can build into your applications. But it's quite cool because they do have a lot of free models on there, or like free alternatives to models, which means that you can actually, like on a daily basis, you might be able to use a model like, for example, let's say DeepSeek 1. You might have like 200 requests, which is how many times you can use that model in a day. So especially when you're experimenting or if you have budget constraints, I'd say like OpenRouter is a really good service to use. And once maybe you want to switch to something more official like OpenAI, it's very easy to do that also.
Awesome. And one more shout out too is like Hugging Face has a lot of they have all the models hosted, they can download. They also have inference API. So if you want to try a whole bunch of different models out, they have like partnerships with, I forget all the providers, a lot of the kind of newer clouds with their GPUs and like Together AI, etc. But you can call different models, like if you want to run DeepSeek, but not from the actual DeepSeek API, and you also don't want to download it locally and run it, they have those models on an inference API. And I think you get some amount free with a free account. I could be wrong. But it's another cool option of like, you want to try a whole bunch of different models for inference. They make it really easy too.
We're never going to end this, because the other thing I wanted to give a shout out is if you also want to try a model, a lot of models on the Hugging Face give you Python code examples of how to run the model, and Google Colab can give you GPUs for free as well. So you can just try running it in Google Colab. It's not a ton of GPU, but you get some GPU, and it can make a difference. You can actually play with starting it up in a Colab notebook that's GPU enabled and one that's not, and see what difference it makes. So,
and you can buy a Colab Pro for like $10 a month and get more GPU. So like if you're actually getting more serious about it, and they give you more TPU time, which is Google's processing unit that's like a GPU. I think you get more of that because they own a whole bunch of them. But yeah, I love Colab. It's like such an amazing tool. And if you don't have a GPU, like they've changed it, but I used to use the free version all the time and never run out of the free GPU. I don't know if they lowered it, but you got a lot back in the day anyway. Okay,
I'm biting my tongue so that we can actually.
I was gonna say, I guess we actually have to end it because I guess I have to go do other work. I'm sure some other people do too. But I feel like I could stay here talking about this all day. One thing I'll share it again. So I shared it recently, just the Slack channel. So if you did want to stay connected, there's also an introduction channel. You can say hello in there more permanently. Someone asked where I'm going to share the notes. So I did share this links to the slides out. I'll share those again. But go check out the Slack channel, and I'll share like this in a more formatted thing a little bit later today, probably. And if you're in Seattle, check out the AI happy hour. I'll share this in the Slack as well. So I'll wrap it up because I feel like we do have to stop. Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking forever. So thank you again, everyone. Special thank you, Stanley, Derek, Steve. Hopefully I will talk to you next time. Hopefully I'll see some of you in the chat next time as well. And with that, have a great day, everyone.